OAS Wright had spent over 30 years building his empire. As the founder and CEO of Wright Technologies, a company worth $28 billion, he had everything anyone could want: wealth, power, and a place in the world of tech giants. But there was one problem. No matter how successful his company became, OAS could never escape the looming shadow of Elon Musk. Every time OAS turned on the news, there it was: Elon Musk's face plastered on every channel. Musk's rockets soared through the sky, his cars sped down highways, and his latest tech innovations were always in the spotlight. The world seemed to revolve around Musk, while OAS remained a figure on the periphery of the tech world. His company, Wright Technologies, made smart home systems, electric car parts, and solar panels, all successful products that were profitable, but none that captured the imagination of the public like Musk's ventures did. Musk companies weren't just businesses, they were cultural phenomena. OAS had built his fortune from scratch, starting from nothing but an idea in a garage, just like Musk. But did anyone talk about him? Number it was always Musk. Musk was the face of innovation, the genius everyone admired. And OAS, despite his own success, was just another tech mogul struggling to be noticed in the crowded field. The more OAS tried to create something groundbreaking, the more he found himself chasing shadows. It was a Friday afternoon, and OAS sat in his corner office, surrounded by sleek, polished mahogany furniture, the very picture of corporate success. 3 giant TV screens lined the wall in front of him, all playing the same thing: an interview with Elon Musk, discussing his latest venture. The graphs on the screen showed his company's stock price shooting up like a rocket, while OAS's own company remained stagnant. It was maddening. OAS slammed his fist on his desk, the wood rattling beneath his hand. "Turn it off!" he shouted. His assistant Melody quickly reached for the remote, muting the screens. The sudden silence in the room felt oppressive. "Why is it always him?" OAS muttered under his breath. "I've worked just as hard. I built this empire from the ground up. So why is he the one getting all the attention?" Melody didn't respond. She had worked with OAS for over 5 years and knew better than to engage when he was in one of his moods, especially when it involved Elon Musk. She stood quietly by, waiting for the storm to pass. OAS stood up and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city skyline. Wright Technologies' headquarters was the 3rd tallest building in the city, but that's all it was, the 3rd tallest. There was something poetic about it, he thought, always just a little below the peak, never quite reaching the summit. It was the perfect metaphor for his career. At 52, OAS had everything anyone could want, yet he felt like an afterthought. Wright Technologies made incredible products, but they never captured the public's imagination like Tesla or SpaceX. The world had long since placed Musk on a pedestal, and OAS was left to watch from the sidelines. "I'm going to challenge him," OAS said suddenly as he turned from the window. His voice was filled with a mix of anger and determination. "Challenge who, sir?" Melody asked carefully. "Elon Musk," OAS replied, his eyes gleaming with a look that Melody had come to recognize. It was the look he got when he was about to make a bold, reckless decision. Melody frowned. "Are you sure that's a good idea, Mr. Wright? Your board meeting tomorrow is already going to be tense with the new budget." But OAS wasn't listening. He had already grabbed his tablet and began typing furiously. Melody stepped forward, trying to intervene, but it was too late. OAS had made up his mind. When he got an idea in his head, there was no stopping him. It was how he had built his empire, and also how he had made his biggest mistakes. "I'll show the world who the real visionary is," OAS muttered, more to himself than to Melody. Melody read the message that OAS had just posted on his social media. Her stomach dropped as she saw the words. "Elon Musk, I challenge you to a tech duel. 1 year, 2 similar products. Let the public decide who the real visionary is. Or are you afraid to go head-to-head with someone who doesn't worship you?" The message was out there now. OAS had posted it for the world to see. "Sir, did you consult with legal first?" Melody asked, though she already knew the answer. She wasn't sure whether to be impressed or horrified. OAS waved her off dismissively. "It's just a tweet. It's not legally binding. But think about the publicity. Right Technologies will be trending worldwide by dinner time. He was right about that. Within minutes, the post had gone viral. News alerts started flooding Melody's phone, and reporters were already calling the office for comment. By the time Melody returned with coffee, OAS was sitting at his desk, watching the storm unfold with a satisfied grin. The 3 screens on his wall now displayed the tweet, surrounded by the growing media frenzy. "We're trending in 6 countries already," OAS said, his voice smug. "This is the kind of marketing you can't buy." Melody didn't respond. She just stood there, feeling a growing sense of unease. The buzz was undeniable. OAS was getting the attention he wanted. But at what cost? By the time the day ended, the challenge had become the top story in the business world. OAS's phone was buzzing nonstop with messages from friends, board members, and investors. Some congratulated him on his bold move, while others questioned his sanity. OAS ignored them all, too focused on his growing social media following. His name was finally getting the attention it deserved, right next to Elon Musk's. For the first time in years, OAS felt like he was the one in the spotlight. As the evening wore on, Melody left for the day, but OAS couldn't tear himself away from the screens. His company was trending worldwide, and the validation he had long craved was finally within his grasp. Then his phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Musk himself. OAS's heart skipped a beat as he read the words, "Challenge accepted." Let's make it interesting. Electric aircraft, 1 year. Winner takes the loser's main company. Game on. The whiskey glass slipped from OAS's hand, shattering on the floor. His mouth went dry as he reread Musk's response. A year, electric aircraft, and the stakes were his entire company. OAS stood frozen for a moment, staring at the message. The floor beneath him felt like it was tilting. He had just bet everything he had built on an impulsive challenge, a challenge that could ruin him. But there was no going back now. The world was watching, and backing out would make him look weak. The stock price would plummet, and his reputation would be irreparably damaged. OAS's mind raced as he stared at the city lights outside his window. Just hours ago, he had felt like an underdog, invisible in Musk's shadow. Now he had put everything on the line. The phone began ringing again, his board, his lawyer, his head of PR, all calling at once. OAS sank into his leather chair, feeling the weight of what he had done. "What have I done?" he whispered to the empty room. The hours that followed OAS Wright's challenge felt like days. His initial rush of excitement had quickly turned to dread as the gravity of what he had done sank in. His phone buzzed constantly with calls from his board, his lawyer, and his head of PR. The challenge had gone viral, but now OAS was facing the consequences of his impulsive decision. The world was watching, and the stakes were higher than he could have ever imagined. That night, OAS barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw headlines flashing across his mind. Right Technologies faces ruin after billionaire CEO's reckless challenge to Elon Musk. He imagined the board meeting the next day, where his colleagues would inevitably question his judgment. He had put everything on the line, his company, his legacy, his reputation, all to prove a point to the world and especially to Elon Musk. But now, as the hours ticked by, doubt crept in. What had he done? Was it worth it? The next morning, OAS arrived at the board meeting 15 minutes early, an unusual move for him. Normally, he liked to make people wait, to assert his dominance, but today he was too nervous to waste time. When he entered the conference room, the atmosphere was thick with tension. His board members were already seated, their faces grim. Patrice Duval, the chairwoman of the board, was glaring at him with a look of disbelief and anger. "Good morning, OAS," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" OAS swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. "I've made a calculated risk," he said, his voice more confident than he felt. "This challenge will bring us attention. The world will finally take notice of Right Technologies." Patrice didn't look convinced. "A calculated risk," she repeated, her voice rising. "You've bet our entire company on a whim. You've thrown us into a competition with Elon Musk, a man with far more experience, resources, and public support than we could ever hope to have." The other board members nodded in agreement. Marcus Leong, One of the senior members of the board leaned forward with a hard look on his face. "We have no experience in aviation, OAS," he said, his voice low and accusing. "You're making a fool of us. We've been building electric car parts and smart home systems for years, but this is way out of our league." OAS opened his mouth to argue, but Marcus cut him off. "And what about the risks to our investors? You've made a challenge with the highest possible stakes. You're gambling with Right Technology's future." OAS's stomach tightened. He had expected resistance, but the level of hostility in the room was more than he had anticipated. He had assumed that once the publicity hit, everyone would rally behind him. But now he was starting to understand just how much trouble he had brought upon himself. "I'm not backing down," OAS said firmly, his voice barely hiding the uncertainty he felt. "We can win this. Right Technologies has the resources, the talent, and the vision to create something revolutionary. Musk might have more experience in aviation, but we've got the drive to make it happen." "Drive?" Marcus scoffed. "You're delusional, OAS. You think we can just build an electric aircraft in 1 year? Do you have any idea what it takes to design, test, and manufacture something like that?" "I know it's going to be hard," OS said, his voice growing stronger, "but we've done hard things before. Look at what we've accomplished with electric car parts and solar panels. We've already been working on electric propulsion for vehicles. This is just the next step. We can do it." The room fell silent. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, none of them willing to speak up. OS could feel their skepticism in the air, and it weighed on him like a heavy stone. He had no choice but to push forward. There was no turning back now. "We don't have the luxury of backing down," OS continued, his eyes sweeping across the room. "If we back out now, it'll look like we're afraid. Our stock will plummet, our investors will lose confidence in us, and our reputation will be destroyed. We can't let that happen." The tension in the room was palpable, but finally Patrice spoke. "Fine," she said, her voice cold. "But know this, OAS. If this fails, if this project brings the company down, you'll be the one to answer for it. We'll hold you responsible." OAS's heart sank. He had gambled everything on this challenge, and now the board was giving him a hard deadline. If he couldn't deliver, they would vote him out. It was as simple as that. The meeting dragged on for what felt like hours, with OAS trying to convince the board that this was an opportunity they couldn't pass up. But despite his best efforts, the room remained unconvinced. By the end of the meeting, the board had reluctantly agreed to support the challenge, for now. But Patrice made it clear that they would be watching him closely. One wrong move, and they would vote to remove him as CEO. As the meeting ended and OAS left the room, he felt like a man walking to his execution. The weight of his decision had never felt heavier. His company was at risk, his reputation on the line, and his future uncertain. But he couldn't stop now. He had to keep pushing forward. That evening, as OAS returned to his office, he found himself faced with a new challenge: how to convince the people inside Right Technologies to get behind this ambitious project. He needed engineers, designers, and developers who were willing to work on an electric aircraft with no prior experience. It was a tall order, and he knew it. He called Melody into his office. "We need to get the best people on this," he said, his voice tinged with desperation. "We need the brightest minds in aviation. We need someone who can help us build this aircraft." Melody raised an eyebrow. "Do you have someone in mind?" OAS nodded. "I have a lead, Violet Chen. She's an engineer who used to work for NASA. She developed electric propulsion systems that could work in space. She's exactly what we need." Melody's eyes widened. "NASA? Do you think she'll help us?" "I have to try," OAS said. "This is our only shot." That night, OAS sent an urgent email to Violet Chen, asking her to join the project. He knew it was a long shot, but if there was anyone who could help them pull this off, it was her. Meanwhile, the pressure inside Right Technologies was mounting. Engineers, legal teams, and HR departments scrambled to deal with the fallout from the public challenge. Some employees began to question whether they should stay at a company that was risking everything on a challenge that could end in disaster. OAS knew that the next few months would be critical. He couldn't afford to lose his best people now. As he sat at his desk, staring at the emails pouring in, OAS couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. He had always been the one in control, the one who called the shots. But now, for the first time, he wasn't sure if he could pull this off. The weight of the world was on his shoulders, and the clock was ticking. In the days that followed, OAS threw himself into planning. He knew that with only a year to develop a viable product to compete with Elon Musk, every moment counted. His company, Right Technologies, was known for its electric car parts, solar panels, and smart home systems. But creating an electric aircraft? That was an entirely different beast. He needed the best minds, the most innovative engineers, and the resources to bring this ambitious dream to life. A few days after his challenge went public, OAS's phone rang. It was Melody, and her voice was strained. "Mr. Wright, you've got to hear this. Violet Chen just agreed to meet with you." OAS's heart skipped a beat. Violet Chen was the key. Her work at NASA, particularly with electric propulsion systems, was the exact kind of expertise that Right Technologies needed. If anyone could help them pull this off, it was Violet. OAS had reached out to her, knowing she had left NASA due to budget cuts and that her innovative propulsion systems had lost funding. He wasn't sure she would take his call, but her agreement to meet was a small miracle. The thought of her joining the team was the only thing keeping his hope alive. The next day, OAS flew to a small office building on the outskirts of the city, where Violet had set up a private lab after leaving NASA. It was a modest space, but as soon as he entered, OAS could feel the energy. There were whiteboards covered in complex equations, half-assembled propulsion systems, and a team of engineers huddled over workstations. Violet, in her late 30s with sharp eyes and a focused demeanor, was reviewing a set of propulsion schematics when OAS entered. She looked up, her expression neutral but not unfriendly. "Mr. Wright," she said, standing to shake his hand, "I've seen your challenge. I'm not sure why you're here, but I'm listening." "I'll get straight to the point," OAS said, his voice steady but tinged with the weight of the decision. "I need your help. I'm challenging Elon Musk to a tech duel, an electric aircraft. 1 year. I need someone who can turn this dream into reality, and that someone is you. You're the best in the field, Violet. I can't think of anyone better suited for this." Violet didn't speak immediately. Instead, she studied him carefully, as if weighing every word he said. "I'm not interested in a publicity stunt, OAS," Violet said, her tone flat. "I've had enough of people trying to use my work for their own gain. What's in it for me?" "I'm offering you unlimited resources," OAS replied. "I will fund whatever you need to make this work. You'll have access to the brightest minds at Right Technologies, and I'll back you fully. I don't just want to beat Musk. I want to change the future of transportation. I believe we can do that together." Violet studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. "I'm in, but we do this my way. No cutting corners. We build something that works, not just something to win a challenge." OAS let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Deal." Within days, Violet moved her team to Right Technologies' headquarters, and the work began. OAS had underestimated just how much was involved in building an electric aircraft. The challenges were immense. The first problem they encountered was propulsion. While Right Technologies had experience with electric vehicle components, they had no experience with aviation. Aircraft propulsion was an entirely different realm, and Violet's team had to start from scratch. Despite the challenges, there was an undeniable sense of optimism within the team. They were working for something bigger than a simple rivalry. The stakes were high, but the goal was clear. Revolutionize transportation. The work was intense. Day and night, engineers worked tirelessly, testing new designs, troubleshooting, and revising. The sense of urgency was palpable, as everyone knew that the clock was ticking. 1 year. That's all they had to build an electric aircraft that could rival Musk's. But not everything was smooth sailing. Early on, Violet's team hit a major roadblock with the battery system. They needed a lightweight, high-density battery that could deliver enough power to make an electric aircraft viable, but the technology just wasn't there yet. The team had to innovate, developing new battery chemistries, pushing the limits of what was possible. They experimented with graphene, high-performance lithium batteries, and even solar technology integrated into the wings. Meanwhile, OAS's pressure mounted. The board continued to question his decision, and the media hounded him at every turn. The challenge was now bigger than just building an aircraft. It had become a symbol of his leadership, his vision, and his ability to turn his company's fortunes around. But the constant attention, combined with the growing skepticism among investors, was taking its toll. One night, OAS was sitting in his office, reviewing the latest set of designs, when he received a call from Marcus Leong, the senior board member who had been the loudest critic of the challenge. "I don't need to remind you, OAS," Marcus said sharply, "but your decisions are putting this company in a very precarious position. We've already seen a drop in stock value, and now we're pouring millions into a project that may never see the light of day. You need to get control of this situation before it spirals out of hand." OAS clenched his jaw, trying to stay calm. "I know the stakes, Marcus, but if we don't push forward, we're done. This is our chance to make history, to change the future. I won't let fear stop us." "You're gambling with all of Right Technologies on this, OAS," Marcus retorted. "If this fails, we'll be looking for a new CEO." The threat was clear. OAS had already risked everything. He had bet his company on this challenge, and if he lost, it wasn't just his career that would be on the line. It was the future of Right Technologies. He hung up the phone, feeling the weight of Marcus's words. In the weeks that followed, the pressure only increased. Despite the setbacks, Violet's team began making progress. The first prototype of the electric propulsion system was completed, but it was still far from ready. The engine worked, but not reliably. The batteries could not handle the load for long enough to make the aircraft feasible. Every time they made one breakthrough, another problem seemed to surface. Still, OAS refused to give up. He had come this far, and he wasn't about to back down now. He threw himself into the work with even more determination. Every decision, every resource, every person was focused on one goal: building an electric aircraft that would change the world. At the same time, OAS's relationship with his daughter, Zara, began to deteriorate. Zara had been supportive of her father's success in the past, but she couldn't understand why he was risking everything for a personal vendetta against Musk. She saw the stress it was putting on their family, and she didn't want her father to lose everything. "Dad, you're not listening to me," Zara exclaimed one night, after seeing another headline about the challenge. "You're destroying yourself over this stupid competition. Why do you have to prove something to everyone?" OAS tried to explain, but his words felt hollow. Deep down, he knew that the challenge had started out as something born of pride and ego. But now, as the pressure mounted, he wondered whether it was worth it. Was this truly about innovation and progress? Or was it just about proving he was better than Elon Musk? The days dragged on in a blur of meetings, prototypes, and constant updates from Violet's team. Each day brought new challenges, but also moments of progress that kept OAS pushing forward. The pressure was relentless, and the clock was ticking. With only 6 months left before the challenge deadline, Right Technologies was in the middle of a race against time and against the expectations of the world. However, the growing intensity of the project wasn't the only pressure OAS faced. One evening, after a particularly long day of reviewing test data, OAS received a visit from Melody, his loyal assistant. She entered his office quietly, her usual calm demeanor now tinged with concern. "Mr. Wright, I think we have a problem," she said, her voice low. OAS looked up from his desk, his brow furrowed. "What's going on?" Melody hesitated for a moment before speaking. "There's someone on the inside, someone in the engineering team, who's been feeding information to our competitors. I've just confirmed it. We have a spy." OAS froze, a cold shiver running down his spine. "A spy? Who?" "I'm not sure yet," Melody replied, "but I've been getting whispers. And I've had a couple of reports from team members saying that some of our progress has been leaking out to outside sources. The timing of some of the rumors, it doesn't add up." The implications were clear. If there was someone feeding information to the competition, it could ruin everything. The last thing Right Technologies needed was their proprietary technology being shared with Elon Musk's team or any other potential competitors. This project was already on the brink of failure, and any leak could cause irreparable damage. "I'll handle it," OAS said, his voice tight. "Keep an eye on the team. If you find anything, let me know immediately." Over the next few weeks, OAS became increasingly paranoid. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone within his team was sabotaging the project from the inside. Every time a new breakthrough was made, he wondered if it would end up in the hands of Elon Musk's engineers. But the spy was elusive, slipping under the radar, leaving OAS with nothing but a growing sense of distrust. Then one evening, while OAS was reviewing some test flight data, Melody entered his office again. This time her expression was serious. "I think I know who it is," she said. OAS stood up, his heart racing. "Who?" "It's Liam Foster," Melody replied. "He's been acting strange for the past few weeks. I've checked, and it turns out he was recruited by Marcus Leong. He's the one feeding information to the competition." Liam Foster had joined Wright Technologies 6 months ago, hired as part of the team working on the electric aircraft. He was brilliant, highly educated, with degrees from MIT and a background in advanced drone technology. He had quickly earned the respect of the engineering team, and his contributions had been invaluable. But now OAS understood why things hadn't been adding up. "Marcus," OAS murmured, the realization dawning on him. "He was behind this all along. He's been working to undermine me." Melody nodded. "I'm afraid so. Liam must have been convinced by Marcus that the challenge was reckless and that it could ruin the company. Marcus probably thought that if Liam helped him sabotage the project, he could force you out." OAS clenched his fists. "I trusted him. He was one of our best engineers, and now he's been feeding information to Marcus?" Melody's voice was soft, almost sympathetic. "I don't think Liam realized what he was doing. At first, he might have believed he was helping protect the company. But now, I think he's conflicted. He knows how important this project is. He might not have wanted to hurt you." "I need to talk to him," OAS said, his mind racing. "I need to find out if he's the one who's been leaking information." Later that evening, OAS invited Liam to his office. The young engineer entered looking nervous, as if he knew something was wrong. "Liam, I need to speak with you," OAS said, his voice steady but filled with underlying tension. Liam nodded and sat down, his eyes avoiding OAS's gaze. "I know about the information leaks," OAS said bluntly, "and I know you've been in contact with Marcus Leong. I need to know why you've been feeding information to the competition." Liam's face paled, and he opened his mouth to speak, but then closed it again, as if trying to find the right words. Finally, he spoke, his voice shaking. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," Liam admitted. "At first, I thought the challenge was a huge mistake. I thought it was too risky for the company, and I was worried about what would happen if we lost. Marcus convinced me that helping him would be the best thing for Wright Technologies. I believed him. But now I realize that I've been making a huge mistake." OAS leaned forward, his gaze hardening. "So you've been working against the company, trying to sabotage our chances of success?" "No," Liam said quickly, his voice desperate. "I didn't want to hurt the company. I didn't understand what you were trying to do. But I see it now. You're not just fighting Elon Musk, you're fighting for something bigger. I get it, OAS. I've been wrong." OAS stared at him for a long moment, processing everything Liam had said. The guilt in Liam's eyes was undeniable, and OAS could tell that he was genuinely remorseful. But the damage had already been done. "You've made your choice, Liam," OAS said quietly. "But I'm going to give you one chance to make things right. You need to tell me everything you've shared with Marcus, and I need you to help us move forward. If you can prove your loyalty from this point on, I'll forgive you. But if I find out you've been feeding any more information to the competition, you'll be out of here. Do you understand?" Liam nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I understand, OAS. I'll make it right." With Liam's confession, OAS felt a strange sense of relief. It was a setback, but not an insurmountable one. The real challenge was ahead, and now OAS had the people he needed to push forward. But as he looked at Liam, OAS knew that the stakes had just gotten higher. If they were going to win this, they needed total trust and commitment from everyone on the team. As the weeks passed, OAS focused on one thing: building the aircraft. He had already put everything at risk for this challenge. But now, as he looked at his team, he realized something even more important. He wasn't just fighting Elon Musk anymore. He was fighting for the future of Wright Technologies, for his company's survival, and for the people who had trusted him. The race was on, and OAS wasn't about to lose. As the weeks turned into months, OAS Wright's resolve was tested to its breaking point. The pressure was unrelenting. With each passing day, the challenge to create an electric aircraft capable of competing with Elon Musk companies seemed more impossible. The technical obstacles kept mounting, and the clock was ticking. Less than 3 months until the deadline. But in the midst of the chaos, a shift occurred within OAS himself. He no longer saw this challenge as a simple competition with Musk. It had become something bigger, something more personal. OAS was no longer fighting just to prove he was Elon's equal. He was fighting for the future of his company and his legacy. But as the pressure mounted, so did his sense of doubt. Was this worth it? Was the risk of losing everything, his company, his reputation, really worth it? OAS often found himself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how it had come to this. What had started as a challenge to prove himself had evolved into a personal mission, one that consumed him entirely. It wasn't just about the tech duel anymore. It was about innovation, about changing the future of transportation. It was about proving to himself that he could truly create something that would matter, something that would leave a lasting legacy. But even as his vision began to crystallize, OAS struggled with the ever-growing doubts of his team. Engineers, designers, and developers had all poured their hearts into the project, but many of them were starting to worry about the feasibility of success. The technical hurdles seemed insurmountable. The electric propulsion system was still unreliable. Battery technology was lagging behind the demands of the aircraft's size and power needs. The prototype was months away from completion, and the board was beginning to ask uncomfortable questions. The stock price was plummeting, investors were getting nervous, and some key engineers had even begun leaving the company, unwilling to be part of what seemed like a losing venture. One morning, OAS received an email that would forever change the course of the project. It was from Violet Chen, the lead engineer who had taken charge of the aircraft's design. She had good news. At least that's how the subject line read. But when OAS opened the email, his heart sank. Violet's team had hit a major roadblock. The latest prototype, the most advanced model they had yet produced, had failed spectacularly during testing. The engine had malfunctioned at high speed, causing a catastrophic failure in the propulsion system. The damage was severe enough to set the project back another month. OAS stared at the email for a long time, the words on the screen blurring in front of him. The setback was devastating. With the deadline rapidly approaching, the failure of the prototype felt like the final nail in the coffin. He had been hoping for a breakthrough, some sign that all of this was worth it. But now all he saw was failure. He picked up his phone and called Violet immediately. After several rings, she picked up. "Violet," OAS said, his voice tight with frustration. "What's going on? How bad is it?" Violet's voice was steady, but OAS could hear the exhaustion in it. "It's bad, OAS. The engine failed during high-speed tests. The system couldn't handle the load. We've got a lot of data to sift through, but it's clear that we're not ready yet. We need more time. We need to rethink our approach." OAS exhaled deeply. He could feel the walls closing in. "We don't have more time. We're running out of it. This has to work. I can't afford to lose everything." Violet was silent for a moment before speaking again. "I know you're under pressure, OAS, but we've made progress. We have to focus on the bigger picture. There's still time if we rethink our approach." OAS paused, his mind racing. Violet's words resonated with him. They had made progress. They weren't at square one, but he had to make a choice. Push forward with the current path and risk everything, or take a step back and reconsider their strategy. It was then that the clarity he needed hit him like a lightning bolt. They couldn't continue trying to compete with Musk on his terms. Musk had the resources, the experience, and the public support. If they kept going down this path, they were bound to fail. But there was another way. They didn't need to create a full-fledged aircraft that could compete with Musk's designs. Instead, they could focus on something more practical, more adaptable, something that could change transportation in ways Musk's massive aircraft couldn't. OAS took a deep breath and made a decision. He had been focused on beating Elon Musk for so long that he had lost sight of the bigger picture. It was time to change the game entirely. He needed to stop trying to play by Musk's rules and create something that was truly revolutionary. It wasn't about a larger, faster aircraft. It was about something smaller, more practical, and far more efficient. The next morning, OAS gathered Violet and the core team together. They met in a small conference room on the top floor of the Right Technologies building. OAS could sense the exhaustion in their faces, the weight of the setbacks bearing down on them. But there was a new energy in his voice as he stood before them. "We're going to change direction," he said, his voice firm. "The current approach isn't working. We're not going to try to build a full-scale aircraft to compete with Musk's design. We're going to create something new, something that no one has done before." Violet raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "We're going to build air taxis," OAS said, the idea coming to life as he spoke. "Electric, autonomous, and small enough to navigate urban environments without the need for runways. Think of it as a new form of transportation that's practical and scalable. No more trying to beat Musk at his own game. Let's create something that will truly change the way people move." There was a stunned silence in the room. Everyone seemed to be processing the enormity of the shift OAS had proposed. This wasn't just a minor tweak to the project. It was a complete rethinking of their approach to the challenge. "What are you talking about?" one of the engineers, Rahul, asked. "An air taxi? You mean like drones?" "Exactly," OAS said, a spark of excitement in his eyes. "A fleet of small electric vehicles that can take off and land vertically. They'll be autonomous and connected to each other, creating a network that can move people around cities without the hassle of traffic. It's a completely new approach to transportation. We're going to leapfrog traditional aircraft and cars." Violet's eyes lit up. "This could actually work," she said, her tone suddenly more energized. "We're not limited by the same constraints as traditional aircraft. We can design something smaller, more efficient, and more adaptable." OAS smiled, feeling a sense of relief he hadn't felt in weeks. This was the answer. They weren't going to compete with Musk anymore. They were going to create something entirely different, something that could transform urban mobility. "Exactly," OAS said. "We're not in this to beat Elon. We're in this to create something that will change the world. We'll call it Project Phoenix. It's time to rise from the ashes of our failures." As the team began to discuss the details of the new plan, OAS couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in months, he wasn't just fighting against Elon Musk. He was fighting for a vision, one that could reshape the future of transportation. And this time, OAS wasn't going to let anyone stand in his way. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of intense work and mounting pressure. OAS had never been one to shy away from hard work, but the pressure of leading his company into uncharted territory was weighing heavier on him than ever before. Project Phoenix was no longer just an ambitious goal. It had become his sole focus. His personal stake in its success was clear. Everything rested on his ability to turn this radical new concept into a reality. The new direction was met with both excitement and skepticism. Many of the engineers, like Violet and Rahul, were immediately on board with the shift to developing air taxis. They saw the potential. A fully electric, autonomous air taxi system could revolutionize urban transportation, cutting through traffic and reducing pollution. But even with the renewed sense of purpose, not everyone shared OAS's vision. Some were hesitant about the feasibility of the new project, particularly considering the short time frame and the massive technical challenges that lay ahead. OAS's own board was no different. They had been supportive of the challenge at first, even if begrudgingly. But as months passed with little progress on the electric aircraft prototype, tensions were starting to rise. OAS had already made significant bets on this challenge, pushing the company to its financial and technological limits. The decision to shift gears into the air taxi concept was bold, but it was also risky. The board had been patient so far, but how much longer would they tolerate the delay? Would they continue to support him if the stock price continued to fall? One morning, after a particularly difficult meeting with investors, OAS sat alone in his office, staring out the window at the sprawling city below. The Right Technologies building, though towering, still seemed small in comparison to the massive task ahead of him. He had pushed his company to the brink. He had challenged Elon Musk in a duel of innovation, and now he was asking them all to believe in an entirely new vision. But what if he was wrong? What if this was just another mistake? Another gamble that would end in ruin? The thoughts were fleeting, though. OAS had learned long ago that doubt was a luxury he couldn't afford. If he was going to lead Right Technologies through this storm, He needed to focus on what was possible, not what might go wrong. His phone buzzed, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was a message from Melody. Emergency board meeting at 11 o'clock. Patrice wants to discuss the project again. Expect it to be tough. OAS exhaled sharply. He knew what was coming. The board had already been uncomfortable with the initial challenge, and now with a radical shift in the project's focus, they were on edge. OAS had made his decision to move forward with the air taxi concept, but he knew this meeting would be a battle. The boardroom was tense when OAS entered. All of the board members were already seated, their faces hard with concern. Patrice Duval, the chairwoman, didn't waste any time getting to the point. OAS, she began, her tone clipped. We're growing increasingly concerned about the direction of this company. You've taken on this challenge with Musk, and while we supported you at first, the reality is that we're sinking millions into a project that's failing to deliver. You've shifted focus to air taxis, but we don't see a clear path to success. We need to talk about the future. OAS sat down at the head of the table, his back straight and his expression neutral. I understand your concerns, Patrice, he said, his voice calm but firm. But this project isn't just about competing with Musk anymore. It's about changing the future of transportation. The air taxi concept isn't a side project. It's our way forward. We can't just try to replicate what Musk is doing. We have to create something new, something that will make a real difference in the world. Patrice narrowed her eyes. That's all well and good, but we're seeing nothing but delays and technical failures. You've changed direction, but how do we know this will work? How much longer are we expected to wait while you gamble with our future? OAS felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had expected this. I know the risks, he said, but I believe in this team. I believe that we can do this. We've made real progress in the past month. The propulsion system works. The battery technology is improving. We're getting closer to the goal. The room remained silent. OAS could feel the skepticism in the air. The numbers didn't lie. Wright Technologies stock had dropped another 8% in the last quarter. Investors were nervous. The challenge had drained resources, and the pivot to the air taxi system had only added more uncertainty. Marcus Leong, one of the senior board members, finally spoke up. Let's be clear about something, OAS, he said, his voice sharp. You're asking us to bet everything on a technology that doesn't even exist yet. If this doesn't work, we'll be left with nothing. Your ego may be too wrapped up in this competition with Musk to see it, but we're running out of time. If we don't see tangible progress soon, I'm afraid we'll have to make some tough decisions. OAS clenched his jaw, his fists tightening at his sides. He had expected resistance from Marcus, but hearing the words spoken aloud made the reality of the situation hit him like a punch to the gut. The board was no longer just worried, they were ready to act. If the project didn't show real, measurable progress in the next few months, they would vote him out. I'm not backing down, OAS said, his voice steady but fierce. I believe in what we're building. Project Phoenix is the future, and we're not backing away from it. Patrice and Marcus exchanged glances, and for a moment OAS wondered if he had said too much. He couldn't afford to alienate the board, but he couldn't back down now. If he did, everything he had worked for would come crumbling down. The meeting ended with no clear resolution. OAS walked out of the room, feeling the weight of his responsibility pressing down on him. His mind was racing. He needed to act. He couldn't afford to fail now. The following weeks were a blur of long hours, intense problem-solving, and constant communication with his team. Violet, Rahul, and the rest of the engineers worked tirelessly to refine the air taxi prototype, facing setback after setback. But despite the challenges, OAS's belief in the project never wavered. The team was on the verge of something huge. They just needed to push through. And then came the breakthrough. One night, as OAS sat in his office reviewing the latest updates, he received a message from Violet. We've got it. The new design works. The air taxi prototype is ready for full-scale testing. For the first time in weeks, OAS felt a surge of hope. The team had done it. They were finally on the cusp of achieving something extraordinary. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment that would define everything. If the prototype passed the tests, it would prove that they had truly built something revolutionary. It would silence the doubters and prove to the board, to the investors, and to Musk himself that Wright Technologies was a force to be reckoned with. But even as he felt that hope rising within him, OAS knew that the road ahead was still long and fraught with challenges. The real test was just beginning. The breakthrough that Violet's team had achieved was nothing short of a miracle. After months of uncertainty, long nights, and technical failures, they had finally developed a working air taxi prototype. It wasn't perfect. There were still tweaks to be made, and the navigation system was still in its early stages. But it flew, it moved, and it could change everything. OAS was up early the next day, pacing his office as he tried to steady his nerves. The moment of truth was upon them. The board meeting was scheduled for 11 a.m., and they had to make their case. If the prototype passed its final tests, it would mark a monumental shift not just for Wright Technologies, but for the entire transportation industry. This was the chance to show the world that they could pull off the impossible. The team had been working around the clock to prepare for the demonstration. The new prototype would fly in front of the board, investors, and a select group of journalists. They would see it in action for the first time. If the test went well, OAS knew they would gain the approval and funding they needed to push the air taxi concept forward. But if it failed, he couldn't bear to think about the consequences. "Melody, are we ready?" OAS asked, his voice taut with anxiety as he paced in his office, watching the clock. Melody, as composed as ever, nodded. "Everything's set, Mr. Wright. The prototype's ready for testing. The press is on standby, and we've got the board members in the conference room. They're all waiting for you." OAS took a deep breath and straightened his suit. "This is it," he muttered to himself. "No turning back now." He made his way to the conference room, where the board was already assembled. Patrice Duval, Marcus Leong, and the rest of the directors were seated, their faces unreadable. The tension in the room was palpable. OAS had seen it before. The skepticism, the doubt. They had already given him one chance to succeed, and now it was time to prove he wasn't just talking a good game. He had to show them the future. If the prototype worked, it would validate everything they had been working toward for the past several months. OAS took his seat at the head of the table, and the room fell silent. He had made his decision to go all in on the air taxi project, and now he had to convince the board that it was the right choice. "We've had our share of setbacks," OAS began, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "We've faced doubt, technical failures, and plenty of skepticism from the outside. But we've come through it. Project Phoenix is no longer a theory, it's real. We've created something that will change the world of transportation. This is just the beginning." He gestured to the door behind him, and Violet entered, holding a remote control. She stood by OAS's side as the board members watched her with a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. "This is it," OAS said, his heart racing. "What you see today could be the future of Wright Technologies and the future of how we move people in cities across the globe." Violet pressed a button on her remote, and the massive doors at the end of the room opened. The board members leaned forward, their eyes wide with anticipation. And then from the hallway, a sleek, futuristic vehicle floated into the room, hovering effortlessly above the ground. It was a small electric air taxi, barely larger than a compact car. The hum of the electric engines filled the room as it glided smoothly to a halt at the center of the floor, its 6 rotors spinning quietly. The room went silent. Even Marcus Leong, who had been the most vocal critic of the project, sat in stunned silence. OAS's heart swelled with pride as he watched the expressions of disbelief on the faces of the board members. "This is a 1/3 scale model of our new urban air mobility vehicle," Violet explained calmly, her voice clear and confident. "It's fully electric, autonomous, and can be summoned through a smartphone app, just like calling an Uber. It doesn't need runways, just a small platform to take off and land. And it's just the beginning." OAS stepped forward as the board members began to stir, their disbelief starting to turn into curiosity. "Imagine a network of these vehicles connecting every part of a city," OAS continued. "No more traffic jams, no more 2-hour commutes. These air taxis can take off and land vertically, so they don't need airports or traditional runways. And because they're electric, they're clean and quiet." The room was buzzing now. The board members whispered among themselves, their faces bright with the possibility of what OAS was presenting. It wasn't just an electric aircraft. It was a complete rethinking of how people could move around cities. It was personal transportation on a scale that could reduce traffic, pollution, and the time it took to get from one place to another. "I'm not here to sell you a vision of the future," OAS said, his voice rising with passion. "I'm here to show you the future. This is what we're building. This is Project Phoenix." He gestured to Violet, who clicked a button on her remote again. The air taxi rose smoothly into the air, hovering several feet above the ground as it moved in a slow circle around the room. The board members gasped as it moved effortlessly, gliding in perfect synchronization with the subtle hum of its engines. It was like nothing any of them had seen before. As the vehicle completed its flight, OAS turned to the board, his eyes shining with confidence. "This is just the beginning. We're going to change the way people think about transportation. We're going to reduce carbon emissions, ease traffic congestion, and make cities more livable for everyone, not just the wealthy. This is our chance to lead the way." Marcus Leong, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. "This is impressive, OAS, but we still need to see a working prototype, one that can carry passengers, not just a scale model." OAS nodded. "We're already working on it. In the coming months, we'll refine the design, increase the size, and prepare for full-scale testing. We're on track." The room went quiet again, the weight of OAS's words settling over everyone. For the first time in months, the board members looked convinced. They weren't just seeing a prototype, they were seeing a vision of the future, one that OAS had promised and delivered on. As the demonstration concluded and the air taxi landed smoothly back in place, OAS turned to the board. "This is our future, and it's time to make it a reality." The applause was slow at first, but it grew steadily as the magnitude of what OAS and his team had just achieved sank in. For the first time in a long time, OAS felt a wave of relief. He had proven his point, not just to the board, but to himself. He wasn't just trying to compete with Elon Musk anymore. He was building something that could truly change the world. The press conference followed, and the media was abuzz with excitement. The news spread like wildfire. Wright Technologies had unveiled a new kind of transportation, an electric, autonomous air taxi that could reshape how people lived and worked in urban environments. The response was overwhelming. For the first time in months, OAS felt like he was standing on solid ground. He had taken a risk, but it was starting to pay off. This wasn't just about competing with Musk or proving himself. This was about creating something that would leave a lasting impact on the world. As the celebration continued, OAS stepped outside to the rooftop, looking out over the city. He could see the potential for a future where air taxis filled the skies, where people no longer had to endure endless hours stuck in traffic. And in that moment, OAS realized that he had found his true purpose. This wasn't about beating anyone. It was about building something that mattered. The excitement surrounding the prototype reveal was palpable. The press had gone wild over the groundbreaking concept, and the world had started to take notice of Wright Technologies and OAS Wright. For the first time in months, OAS felt a sense of calm settle over him. The gamble, the risk, and the relentless effort had all been worth it. The idea he had fought for, the vision that had kept him awake at night, was finally taking shape. But as the days passed and the initial thrill of the reveal began to fade, OAS couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. The board had been impressed, the press had been captivated, and investors were cautiously optimistic. Yet OAS knew that the real challenge was far from over. They were still months away from a fully operational air taxi system, and every day brought new technical hurdles to overcome. Then came the moment that would change everything. It was late one night when Violet called OAS into her office. He had just returned from a dinner meeting with potential investors, and the weight of the day was beginning to set in. He hadn't expected anything more than another update on the prototype. But as he walked into Violet's lab, he could tell from the look on her face that something was wrong. "OAS," she began, her voice unusually serious. "I need to talk to you about something." OAS sat down across from her, his curiosity piqued. "What's going on, Violet? Is everything okay?" Violet hesitated for a moment before speaking. "There's something you need to know about our air taxi's navigation system. The truth is, we didn't build it all from scratch. The foundation of the algorithm that makes it work, It came from an open-source project released by one of Elon Musk's companies. OAS felt the floor drop beneath him. What do you mean? Are you saying we used Musk's technology? Violet nodded, her expression grave. Yes, Liam Foster was the one who found it. He stumbled upon the code, which had been released by one of Musk's smaller ventures for drone navigation. We modified it extensively to fit our air taxis, but the core of the system is theirs. The revelation hit OAS like a ton of bricks. For months, he had believed that Right Technologies was on the verge of something truly revolutionary, an idea born from his own vision, a way to change the world of transportation. And now here he was, facing the truth. The cornerstone of their success had come from the very man he had been trying to outdo. He stood up and began pacing the room, his mind spinning. How did we not know this sooner? How could I have let this slip through the cracks? We've built everything on top of Musk's work, and now it feels like everything we've done is a lie. Violet looked down, her hands resting on the desk in front of her. We didn't realize it at first. We thought the code was a tool we could use, and we modified it to suit our needs. It was never our intention to steal anything. But now, with the press coverage and the growing attention from investors, I think we need to come clean. OAS's heart sank. This wasn't just a technical problem, it was a moral one. If the truth got out, it would destroy everything he had worked for. All the publicity, all the attention, and all the hype surrounding the air taxi system would crumble. The press would tear apart Right Technologies, calling it a fraud. Musk would have the perfect ammunition to claim victory in their so-called tech duel. He ran his hand through his hair, struggling to think. We can't keep this a secret, but how do we tell the world? How do we admit that we built our success on Musk's work? Violet's face softened, and she stood up, walking over to him. You have to be honest, OAS. It's the only way forward. If you tell the truth, the world will respect you more. It's better to come clean now than have it all fall apart later. OAS knew she was right, but the thought of admitting they had used Musk's technology made him feel sick to his stomach. He had spent months building this vision, fighting to show the world that Right Technologies could be just as innovative as Musk's companies. And now, in the end, they had been standing on the shoulders of Musk's work all along. I can't lie to the board, OAS said, his voice strained, but I also can't let everything we've built fall apart. The following day, OAS called an emergency meeting with his core team. Melody, Violet, Rahul, and Liam were all present, and the atmosphere was heavy with the weight of the truth that had come to light. OAS had spent the night thinking about his next steps, and he knew he couldn't hide from this. It was time to face the consequences. I've had a conversation with Violet, OAS began, his voice steady but filled with regret. And we need to talk about the navigation system we've been using in our air taxis. The truth is, we didn't build it all from scratch. We used open source code from one of Elon Musk's companies. We've modified it, we've improved it, but the core of the system is theirs. The room went silent. The weight of OAS's words sank in, and everyone looked at each other, unsure of what to say. Violet was the first to speak. We didn't do this intentionally, she said, her voice calm but firm. We were trying to create something new, but we used what was available. It's not theft, it's innovation. But we have to be honest about it. Liam shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had been the one to find the code, but he hadn't known how much it would come to mean in the grand scheme of things. He had thought it was just a tool, something to help them get to the next step. OAS took a deep breath. I'm going to tell the board the truth. I have to. It's not just about the technology anymore. It's about integrity. We've built something great, but we need to own up to how we got here. If we don't, it will all come crashing down. Later that day, OAS called Patrice Duval, the chairwoman of the board, to request an emergency meeting. He had made the decision. The truth would come out, and he would face whatever consequences awaited him. As the board members gathered, OAS took a deep breath and prepared himself. I have something important to confess, OAS began. We've made progress with the air taxi prototype, and we've seen tremendous interest from the public. But there's something we need to be honest about. The core navigation system we've been using, it comes from an open source project that was originally developed by one of Elon Musk's companies. The board sat in stunned silence. OAS could feel the weight of the moment, knowing that this admission could undo everything he had worked for. But there was no going back now. "I'm not proud of this," OAS continued. "We should have been more transparent from the beginning. But now I'm asking for your trust. What we've built is still groundbreaking. We've improved upon the work that was already done, and we're moving forward with something that can change transportation. But I can't ask for your support if we don't own up to what we've done." Patrice was the first to speak, her voice calm but firm. "I appreciate your honesty, OAS," she said. "It's not easy to admit when you've made a mistake, but we need to know if we can still trust this project. If the foundation of this technology comes from Musk's work, what does that mean for us?" OAS looked at the board members, each one's face unreadable. "It means we still have a chance to innovate. It means we can build something better. It means that, despite the mistakes we've made, we still have a vision for the future." The meeting ended with no clear resolution, but OAS had made his choice. He had told the truth, and now he had to wait to see what the world and his company would do with it. The days after OAS's confession were a whirlwind of intense meetings, tough questions, and growing uncertainty. The revelation that Wright Technologies had used open-source code from one of Elon Musk's companies rocked the business world. Headlines flashed across every news outlet, questioning whether the company had truly created anything innovative at all, or if they had simply repurposed someone else's work. OAS had known the truth would eventually come to light. He had always prided himself on being a man of integrity, but in that moment, he questioned if he had made the right decision. Was admitting their reliance on Musk's technology going to tear everything down? Or was he showing the world that honesty was the only way forward? The stock price had taken a hit. Investors were skittish, and a wave of doubt began to sweep through Wright Technologies. Despite the groundbreaking work they had done, the air taxi concept, and the incredible potential it held, the backlash over the admission of using Musk's code was threatening to overshadow everything. OAS sat in his office staring at the latest financial reports. The numbers were grim. The board was divided. Some members praised him for coming clean, but others were worried about the long-term consequences. If this didn't get resolved quickly, OAS knew that Wright Technologies could spiral out of control. It wasn't just the business side of things that weighed heavily on OAS. The toll it was taking on his personal life was just as damaging. Zara, his daughter, had been supportive of him from the start, but their relationship had become strained in the wake of the scandal. She had watched her father risk everything for this challenge, and now she was questioning the cost. She had been quiet ever since the press conference, and OAS knew it wasn't just the media frenzy that bothered her. It was the lie he had been living. She had seen him as a visionary, a man capable of changing the world, but now he seemed just as human as anyone else. A man who had made mistakes, and worse, a man who had built a revolution on the work of someone else. One evening, after another stressful day of phone calls and emergency meetings with the board, OAS returned home to find Zara sitting alone in the living room. She was watching a news segment about the air taxi project, the segment critical of Wright Technologies and OAS's leadership. "Dad," she said, not looking up from the TV, "what are you going to do now? You can't keep pretending that this is all your idea. You've been working so hard, but you've built this on someone else's work, and now it's all falling apart." OAS sat down beside her, his heart heavy. "I know, Zara. I messed up. I should have been more transparent from the beginning, and I shouldn't have let my pride take over. But I'm still fighting for something that I believe in." Zara turned to look at him, her eyes filled with frustration, but also something softer, a hint of understanding. "It's not just about the project, Dad. It's about what's really important to you. Is it the company, or is it about making a real difference?" OAS didn't have an immediate answer. For the first time, he was faced with the reality that his drive to compete with Musk, to prove himself, had clouded his vision. He had started this challenge as a way to win, to show the world he could stand up to the tech giant. But somewhere along the way, he had lost sight of why he was doing it in the first place. The next morning, OAS decided he had to take a stand, not just for the company, but for himself. He had to make the tough decision to put his ego aside and focus on what really mattered, creating something meaningful, something that would truly change the way people lived. He called a meeting with the board. This time it was different. This wasn't just about trying to salvage the company. It was about facing the consequences and moving forward with integrity. OAS knew that the board might not be happy with his decision, but he couldn't lie to them anymore. He couldn't keep pretending that the challenge was about winning a duel. It had to be about the future. When the board members gathered, OAS took a deep breath and spoke with sincerity. "I've made mistakes. I've let my ego and pride cloud my judgment. But today I want to tell you something different. We've built something with real potential. Our air taxis are a new form of transportation. But we didn't get here alone. We built on the work of others, and that's something I should have admitted sooner. I won't make excuses. I'll own up to it." There was a pause, a long silence that felt like an eternity. OS could feel the tension in the room, but he didn't back down. "What I'm asking for now is your trust, not because of what we've done, but because of what we can do together. We've created a concept that can change the world, and I believe in it. I believe in the team we've built and the vision we share. I'm asking you to stand by me as we push forward, not for the recognition, but for the impact we can make." Patrice Duval, the chairwoman, was the first to speak. "OAS, I respect your honesty. It wasn't easy to admit, but you've shown us the true spirit of leadership. We've had our doubts, but I believe in the potential of Project Phoenix. Let's move forward with it." The other board members nodded, some still wary, but others more willing to put their faith in the vision. The truth had been spoken, and though it hadn't been easy, it had cleared the air. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in months, OAS felt that he had a chance to make a real difference. Not just by building an electric aircraft, but by leading a company that could innovate with integrity. With the board's support in place, OAS and his team threw themselves back into the project. They continued working tirelessly to refine the air taxi system. The media had calmed somewhat, and public opinion, though still divided, was beginning to shift in their favor. Investors began to show renewed interest, and slowly but surely, the world started to see Wright Technologies as more than just a competitor to Musk. They saw it as a company with a purpose, one that wasn't afraid to face its mistakes and use them as stepping stones to build something greater. Zara, too, saw a change in her father. He wasn't the same man who had impulsively launched a challenge to Musk, driven by ego and a need to prove himself. He had grown. He had found humility, and he had found the true meaning of success, not in outdoing someone else, but in creating something that mattered. Months later, Wright Technologies launched the first commercial air taxi service in a major city. The small, sleek vehicles, dubbed the Phoenix Flyers, took to the skies, gliding above the streets, easing traffic congestion, and offering people a new way to move through their world. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was a step forward, a revolutionary step. OAS stood on the rooftop of Wright Technologies' headquarters, watching the Phoenix Flyers soar above the city. The future was no longer defined by a rivalry with Elon Musk. It was defined by a vision of transportation that could truly make a difference in people's lives. Zara, now studying aerospace engineering in college, stood beside him. "You did it, Dad," she said, her voice full of pride. OAS smiled, his heart full of gratitude and relief. "We did it, Zara, and it's only the beginning." As they watched the Phoenix Flyers glide through the sky, OAS realized that the real challenge had never been against Musk or any other competitor. It had been against his own pride. And by overcoming that, he had found his true purpose. Not in proving himself, but in creating something that would change the world for the better. And with that, OAS knew he had finally won.